It's time for Mr. Fundamental!
Presented by no one.
A lot happened during the draft, and I don't want to bore you with trades you're not interested in, so check out the video description for timestamps on the trade that you want to hear about. Right before the draft started, we had ourselves a deal between OKC and Philly, sending Green and Ferguson to the Sixers, while the Thunder got Horford, the 34th pick, a lightly protected 2025 first rounder, and the rights to a Serbian guard whose name I don't know how to pronounce. I was anticipating the Philly to acquire a shooter, whether it's through a trade or free agency. Danny Green joins a defensive rotation of Thibault and Simmons, with Embiid patrolling the paint. That is some scary stuff. I can see Green having a bounce back season, since there's a long queue of scorers before his number is called. Getting Ferguson is good insurance if Green leaves after this year, and act as another young wing to groom. The biggest gain from this trade is clearing the logjam up front. Harris can slide back to the 4, where he's at his best, while adding a capable 3 and D wing to fill the void in the starting lineup. The future first rounder could be a slight problem, since Embiid's contract does end around then, while Simmons has 1 year left. A lot could happen between then, good or bad, but it's still too early for Philly to worry about it right now. Overall, they cleared salary, got an impact player who complements their stars, and still got a young prospect back to develop. That's pretty good value for a possible salary dump candidate, and we're seeing Morey's first influence on the Sixers. Now, what can I say about the Thunder? They're doing what they do best, and this trade makes the Schroeder deal even better. The most exciting part is that they could potentially flip Horford again in the near future. Getting more picks this year could help the Thunder move up in the draft, and that's exactly what they did, but we'll get to that later. I like how the Thunder got the 2025 pick rather than one that will convey in the next few years, since the Sixers are projected to be a playoff team with Simmons, Embiid, and Harris all under contract. Things could be a lot different in 2025. We won't know what this pick would be like until we get closer, but the suspense and potential turmoil is all it takes to make this pick valuable. If you want an example, think of a narrative in 2018 surrounding the 2019 Kings pick that was conveyed to Boston. That top 1 protected pick from a rebuilding team has such a high value on the trade market. It turned out to be a 14th pick after a surprising season by the Kings, but it was still a lottery pick compared to a late first rounder. The most recent example is the Grizzlies pick that will be conveyed to the Celtics. The same thing happened. I don't know much about the Serbian point guard, but I do know that he's 26 and is considered one of the Europe's best point guards. Although the Thunder are heading into a rebuild, they actually build a solid team, and I anticipate more of these trades coming, but they can't stop taking dubs. After an understandable Covington trade to recoup assets, the Rockets traded Ariza and the 16th pick for a future first rounder from the Pistons. With Westbrook and Harden likely out the door, the Rockets should be keeping these draft assets, especially after sending most of theirs away to the Thunder. Now if you combine all their moves since the trade deadline, they basically flipped Capella for a heavily protected first round pick from the Pistons. That's outright bad. Calling this a salary saving move is a stretch, since only $1.8 million of Ariza's contract was guaranteed. In other words, the Rockets saved $1.8 million for the cost of moving down in the draft. Making things worse, the Rockets went on to buy a 2021 first rounder from the Pistons for $4.6 million worth of cash considerations. The only positive thing for the Rockets is that they can freely use their mid-level exception after the trade. I just don't see them using that to add an impactful player who's willing to join a team with locker room issues, one that could convince Harden to stay, or a player who could help them stay relevant when Harden is gone to convey late picks to the Thunder. The Pistons are doing a great job with rebuilding this offseason. Giving out their own first round pick is a no-no for rebuilding teams, but I'm assuming it's heavily protected. They capitalized on the Rockets' desire to save money and got a veteran who could be a stopgap or flipped again for more assets. Worst case scenario, they waive him to clean the books, but they still have the 16th pick to show for it. Selling picks shouldn't be a move for rebuilding teams as well, based on how the Warriors got pretty good value when buying a pick from the Bulls and selecting Jordan Bell. This situation is different. The Pistons essentially moved up from the second round to a mid-first rounder. Big plays by Troy Weaver. The biggest news was probably Bogdanovic declining his trade to the Bucks. This could cause a huge ripple effect across the league, since it could impact Giannis' next destination to some extent. It's weird to see a player not wanting to join a contender, and also getting a decent payday along the way. I think it's partly an issue with his projected role, where he's probably the 4th option on the Bucks. We've seen how Mirotic was fed up with how he was utilized in the NBA, and went back to Europe, despite getting better offers in the NBA. Looking at the tampering case, this trade definitely doesn't warrant that. Stars do that all the time, but there usually aren't any official reports. Teams always discuss trades behind the scenes before official dates, and this is just another one. The two reasons for their agreement and trade framework before the official date is because Bogdanovic is a restricted free agent, and the date the Bucks need to guarantee Ersan's contract. The Kings can match any offer and trade him to the Bucks, so it's not like the Bucks got a head start on trying to recruit Bogdanovic. They needed to agree on a trade so the Bucks know whether to guarantee Ersan's contract to make the money work. In other words, if the reports of this trade never came out, like those Woj bombs, this deal would have still went through. I don't know the exact rules of the tampering policy, but I doubt anything will happen to the Bucks. The downside is that the Bucks can't get a player of his caliber with a package of DiVincenzo, Ersan, and Wilson, especially after sending most of their picks to the Pelicans, and they also waived Ersan's contract, which was their only piece to match salaries. We got the first trade up in the draft before it started, with the Knicks moving up 4 spots by tacking on a second rounder. Now both teams made moves with these assets later on, so I'll talk about those as well. The Jazz selected Udoka Azubuike with a 27th pick. This is a solid selection, and if anyone knows how to develop a long rim protector, it'll be the Jazz. I assume they're going to bring him along slowly, and they cleared up their center logjam by sending Tony Bradley and a 38th pick to the Pistons for future draft considerations and cash considerations. This is a strictly money-saving move, since the Jazz need to open up space to re-sign Jordan Clarkson. Replacing Bradley with Azubuike is like a restart for the Jazz to develop a backup center. They'll have 4 years of his rookie contract to do so, while Bradley might need a new deal next year. Quickly going over the Pistons side, this is a salary-absorbing move. They got compensated with draft assets, and although their future draft consideration hasn't been reported, I think he'll be a decently protected second rounder that probably won't convey. Moving back to the initial Knicks and Jazz trade, the Knicks' decision to move up to the 23rd pick was adding ammunition to move up in the draft if necessary. They had their eyes set on Obi Toppin, but he fell right into their laps with the 8th pick. It might seem redundant to trade back again, but their Wolves trade was still a net gain in general. They might have cost themselves RJ Hampton, who probably has the highest ceiling among players left on the board. They did get Emmanuel quickly. He doesn't have the highest upside, but does have a higher floor with a chance to get better. The Knicks have plenty of upside picks already, like Barrett and Knox, so going this route is good for them. While Quickly might not see a lot of floor time, he does fit the system that Thibodeau implements. Quickly is an undersized shooting guard who can shoot lights out. He would excel in off-screen actions and also those high ball screens that Thibodeau ran for Nate Robinson and DJ Augustine. He also feels the need on the roster compared to Hampton, who has the potential to become a shooter. They sent the 33rd pick to the Clippers for a future second rounder. Not much to talk about here, but the Knicks don't need that many young prospects right now. The Clippers got themselves a 3rd string center to groom if they do flip Zubac for an upgrade, but also don't need to sign a backup free agent big in the middle of the season if injuries hit. He's a solid interior defender and pretty agile for his size. Oturu has an old school post game with a sprinkle of modern day stretch big. Any perimeter development offensively is just an added bonus. Moving on to the Thunder and Wolves trade. The Thunder traded up for the 17th pick and James Johnson, and sent back Ricky Rubio, the 25th and 28th pick. This is the first consolidation move for the Thunder, and it was a pretty good one. They gave up a player that's not a part of their long-term plans, and 2 late first rounders, with mostly specialists and win-now players on the board. They used the 17th pick to get a high upside player in Pokusevski. I'm just going to call him AP from now on. This is the right move to make, since that's the highest pick they've gotten in the draft. The Thunder are no stranger to high upside picks, and while most of them hasn't worked out during their competitive days, like Terrence Ferguson or Perry Jones III, they now have the time to slowly develop them, like how they groomed Serge Ibaka. AP's ceiling could be as high as Porzingis, but his bust level could be like Dragan Bender. That's a pretty big swing, but at number 17, that's the right call. Getting James Johnson on an expiring contract is actually underrated. I mean, he's not going to fetch a lot if they trade him again, or help the team out too much, but his contract ends 1 year earlier than Rubio's. You shed salary and move up in the draft. That's a win. The Wolves are in a limbo, where they want young players to grow with D'Lo and Cat, but also trying to become competitive since their picks are with the Warriors. They towed that line with this trade, since Rubio can help them win now and provide another playmaker and some much needed defense. They moved back up in the draft to the 23rd pick in the trade with the Knicks and selected Leandro Bolmaro. He reminds me a lot of Rubio in the sense that they're good oversized playmakers and defenders, but their careers will be determined by their shooting development. I'm not too sure about this selection, because they have plenty of wings who can't shoot, but does fill a need defensively and has the upside for the Wolves to stomach their draft obligations. Their selection at 28 was Jaden McDaniels. At this point of the draft, you're selecting from either specialists or high-risk, high-reward players, and McDaniels fits the latter. He potentially fills a need for the Wolves in terms of shooting and defense right now, but potential is a big if in the NBA. I think they did pretty well in this deal, since they're prepping to convey the pick to the Warriors. We have our first 3-team trade last night, and I would say it was fair value all around. The Nets have been targeting RJ Hampton before the draft, so it was a puzzling move when they did this. Thinking about it, getting a young knockdown shooter not only helps them now, but also a potential package for Harden. You can never have enough shooting, so Shamet adds depth to the backcourt, and also acts as an insurance if Joe Harris leaves in free agency. I know the Nets said they will keep him at all costs, but having a backup plan won't hurt. While Hampton has more potential, Shamet's skill set is a sure thing, which might be viewed as a better asset for a Rockets team in flux. I think the Clippers gotta be a winner in this trade. They essentially upgraded a young shooter into a young scorer and facilitator who knocked down 40% of his triples. They did that without giving up draft assets, and also clearing up some money by dumping Magruder's contract. Kennard will need a new deal next year, but this move is all about now. The last part about the Clippers is the same reason why the Pistons traded away Kennard. The Pistons don't want to deal with a large contract extension at the start of the rebuild, so they got ahead of it and recouped assets. If they kept Kennard and execute a sign and trade, teams that will want him are going to be playoff contenders giving up mid to late first rounders, so the 19th pick they've got isn't bad value. Personally, I think Kennard could have netted them more, but looking at the teams before the pick, there isn't really a trade partner. One worry is that if Kennard got them the 19th pick, that could mean that Derrick Rose trade value could get them even less. The Nuggets made a pretty good move in the Pelicans trade by getting RJ Hampton with the 24th pick. This is another one of those picks that Nuggets have nailed in the past 2 years, with MPJ and Bobo. The Nuggets have a really good team that's already competitive. Adding a high upside guy gives them another shot at grooming a third star. Worst comes to worst, he doesn't develop and is out of the league, but that won't hinder the Nuggets' ability to compete now and in the future. That's a good gamble at the cost of a late first rounder. The Pelicans have plenty of picks and young players on the roster already, so it's understandable that they sent away the pick. This is basically a move to delay making this pick, since the future draft pick they're getting back from the Nuggets should be between the mid to late first round. They could use that as a future asset, or they could get a clearer picture of what they need to add when that pick conveys. You can apply the same idea to the Celtics trading away the 30th pick. They had multiple picks in the draft, and they aren't going to come out with 3 rookies again. The Grizzlies used the 30th pick to select Desmond Bane. I love this move both as a Bane and Grizzlies fan. He's a solid two-way player who can make an impact right away, but also the potential to become a Malcolm Brogdon-like player. He's also a good backup plan if DeAnthony Melton gets too lucrative of an offer in free agency. One of my favorite trades of the night was the Mavs getting Richardson and a 36th pick for Seth Curry. Richardson was a realistic target the Mavs should pursue, but they didn't even have to part with much to get him. The Mavs wanted a third star and more wing defense. I see Richardson as a lesser Oladipo and one of the best all-around non-star player. He's a pesky defender, a 3-level scorer, and also has the experience of being a top scoring option before. He had a down year with the Sixers' poorly spaced offense, so I wouldn't be surprised if he bounced back on the Mavs' #1 offense. Sending away Curry could sting, but Richardson is more than capable of filling a scoring role. The most important part is that the Mavs can slot another perimeter defender in the closing lineups without sacrificing any offense. Not only was this an upgrade, but they also got compensated for it as well. They took Tyler Bay with the 36th pick, and it'll take some time for him to develop. He was kinda like a PJ Tucker in college, and will need to move to the perimeter, but he's a great fit on the Mavs, since they need his defense, but their offense could keep things simple for him, as a spot-up shooter and straight-line driver. As for the Sixers, I see why they made this move, but they sold low on Richardson. It's hard to find two-way guards on borderline starter contract who can create for themselves and man the point. He's the type of player you slot next to Simmons, and the results would have been better if not for the cramped spacing. It's weird that they gave up a pick as well, but I guess the Mavs needed more incentive to make this trade. Anyhow, Curry does fill a need for the Sixers. He'll fill that JJ Redick role with more off-the-dribble pop and could act as a backup point while Tyrese Maxey develops. The main problem they have now is their closing lineup. Green and Thibault shores up their defense, but they don't do much offensively besides inconsistent spot-up shooting. Curry provides more offense and off-the-balance threes, but could become a target defensively. They could mix and match, but Richardson would have made it an easier decision. A big argument is that they don't need to worry about a raise since Curry's contract runs for an extra 2 years, but the Sixers had Horford's massive contract before, so a raise for Richardson wouldn't be that bad considering his skill set. One reason I'm not a huge fan of this trade for the Sixers is that they could keep Richardson, and get a shooting specialist in free agency, like Bryn Forbes or resigning Korkmaz. Don't forget they also have Shake Milton, who has a similar skill set to Curry. Rounding up the smaller trades, the Pelicans sent away 2 of their second rounders for future ones. This isn't a big deal since the Pelicans are just delaying their selection until it's needed. The Jazz picked up Elijah Hughes, who was pretty hard to evaluate. He was the go-to option that drew a lot of defensive attention, but doesn't have one reliable offensive skill. He's an inconsistent shooter and not a good inside scorer, but that could be a result of Syracuse's lack of creators. He's projected as a capable defender within their zone defense, so did the zone prevent him from showing his full defensive potential, or was it the other way around? Either way, Hughes is the type of older player where the NBA could maximize his full potential, but also the possibility that he's out of the league in a few years without developing a niche. The Hornets got Nick Richards, who was a 5-star prospect before joining Kentucky, and had a breakout season in his junior year. Now, second rounders usually don't make a huge impact, but Richards could become a more impactful player than his draft position suggests. He has that Mitchell Robinson two-way rim running potential, but also a developing jumper. A big factor is his basketball IQ and feel for the game, which could be a result of starting basketball so late. A realistic projection could be JaVale McGee or even Dwayne Dedmon, late bloomers who could carve out a role in the league. The Grizzlies moved up to the 35th pick and sent the 40th and a future second rounder to the Kings. The Grizzlies are giving themselves a head start in finding pieces to add to their young core, rather than doing so later in their competitive primes. They got Xavier Tillman, who reminds me a lot of Grant Williams, a front court role player who's solid in every aspect besides shooting. While some teams worry about his tweener status, the Grizzlies capitalized on that, pretty similar to what they did with Brandon Clark last year, when they have Triple J as a partner to cover up their weaknesses. Tillman isn't going to have a big role, but a future rotation of Triple J, Clark, and Tillman could be very hard to score on. Despite moving down, the Kings still got a player who was ranked top 20 on the Ringer's big board. Robert Woodward is a smart player who makes winning plays. That would help the Kings' culture, and he'll be a nice fit besides their talented players. He projects as a glue guy who'll need to continue developing his 3-ball. Even if he doesn't, the Kings still have a future second rounder to show for it. The last one I've got is the Thunder moving up to the 37th pick and sending the Wizards the 53rd pick and a future second rounder. This was a draft and stash move for the Thunder, who selected Vit Krejci. I hope I got that right. He's a 6'7" point guard who suffered a torn ACL, so this is going to be another long-term move for the Thunder. The Wizards moved down and got a future second rounder, but still got to select Cassius Winston, who was ranked higher in most draft boards. He doesn't have star written all over him, but has a good attitude and plays the right way. I can see him developing into a reliable backup guard, which will be useful for the Wizards' uncertain future. I'm not sure whether I covered all the smaller trades, but I've got most of them off the Woj Twitter feed. Let me know down below what you think of any of these trades, and maybe what you would have done if you don't agree with their moves. If you enjoyed the video, consider to drop a like down below, and hit that subscribe button. The lottery picks will be my next analysis, so I'll see you then.